Good afternoon, Daniel, and thank you for taking time to speak with us today. My name is Lilo. You also can call me Lin. We are working on assignment related to business process modeling at UniSA. My teammates and I would love to learn more about your organizations, about the business processes, how they operate, what the key steps are, and what kinds of challenge you face in day-to-day operations. Before we start, is it okay if we record the interview for transcription purposes?
Yeah, that's fine.
No, thank you. The recording will be kept confidential and used only for these assignments. I want to assure you that all the information shared during the interview will be treated as confidential, and your responses will only to be used for academic purposes. The interview will take about 30 to 40 minutes. We will ask a series of questions, and feel free to share any additional questions and insights as we go along. Okay, let's begin.
Easy.
Could you please introduce yourself a bit, your position, and what you do in role?
Oh, okay. Look, it's kind of a position that's been given to me. It's more like an operations manager slash pastor of a food charity organization, which is also like a church outreach. If you can, it's probably a little bit. Yeah, we're very much an exception to a lot of business sort of structures. So that may it might be a little bit too confusing to explain that. But that's basically what we are. We're like a church charity, and basically we specialize in rescuing food. So food that other people would generally throw away, even food rescue organizations which exist that get secondhand or secondary food. There is stuff which they don't accept, but we do. We will take pretty much everything. It was one of the rules is that we don't say no to people donating stuff, and the reason for that is because that way we get more, and then it also means then that they are more willing. They don't feel like restricted in what they can give us. So instead of going, oh, I don't know whether I can give that to them, and then just never ever being offered because they're afraid that they might be rejected. They can just basically just give us anything, and we're pretty much happy to take that, which means that we get a lot more stuff. In relation to sort of what that looks like, we have approximately, I think it's 2,000 members on the books, but what that looks like is about sort of 180 to 200 families, which we service per day. And then what's that one? 1, 2, 3, 4, probably about 10 agencies or secondary organizations which we also service throughout the week. It is approximately like 1 to 2 a day. Just it really depends on the week. Some weeks are very busy, and then other weeks there is a fluctuation. Because of in Australia we have the fortnight system, and so the government pays pensioners per fortnight, and so there is a little bit of that. So mainly because the agencies which we service in relation to that. So usually our 1 week will be busier than the other week. Not always, but generally speaking. What other things can I say? Other than that, we're realistically a non-denominational church, which uses this as like basically part of our ministry, i.e. feeding the poor, helping out those people who are in need and the least of of society. What that generally means is, people get these sort of fluffy ideas of, rainbows and, clouds with silver linings and, like little heart palpitations and stuff, like about goodness and mercy and stuff. But the reality is that you go there to help somebody and they growl at you. And that's the reason those people are in need, is because that's what they do. That they try to bite you when you help them. And so, yeah, what you find is that it can be, especially for people that don't have faith or don't have a strong, character or a strong, relationship, it can be quite tiring on them. We've had a few people that have left just because they're not able to handle the lack of sainthood that human beings display, and that because people people steal and people do all of those negative things, and then because we're dealing with like the lowest of the low, you see it a lot more often. And what else is there with that? Part of us as a service to just is not just helping those people, but people who volunteer with us. We try to help disciple and grow in life and their knowledge of God. Really, my aim, especially when somebody comes on board, is to help them move from where they are to the next step, whatever that is for them. Any further questions in relation to that?
Thank you. Yeah, I know this sometimes is very difficult, but it's really a great job. And I will ask you the first questions.
Okay.
Can you walk us through the key operational processes involved at Faith Works, such as sourcing donations, sorting storage, kitchen preparation, restocking, and customer service? What do you think?
Was that like all of the things that I sent you in the message? So look, we don't do any sourcing per se, in that basically the founder, which is Bruce, what he has said is that every time that he has tried to actively himself pursue obtaining clients for FaithWorks, it's fell dead. It doesn't work. So what he relies on instead is basically Jesus, which to most people is insufficient. But the reality, that is the reality, is that people come to us and then, thank you. People come to us and then they offer, they approach us rather than us approaching them, and it's pretty well been that way. That's how we have pretty much all of the clients that we have. We don't actively advertise. In fact, we in many ways we prohibit advertising, in that we've had a few of the agencies which we service which have requested to put us on sort of their websites and things like that, and we have declined. We would prefer not to be known, not to be sort of put out there. It's really just Jesus and word of mouth, which we rely on. So yeah, basically in terms of procurement, then what that goes back to, like say about a month ago, we had some difficulties with not having enough stock and not having enough fruit and vegetables and that sort of thing. And the only real change between now and then, when we actually have enough, is prayer. That's really the only difference, is that we just sort of expected God to provide that gap. And so now we're struggling actually to fit stuff into our freezers. I've had to turn one of our fridges into a freezer, and then we've got having to store some stuff outside in the truck, which one of our trucks doubles as a portable fridge. So that's the reality of procurement, the short answer is just Jesus. Other than that, key processes being, for me, sort of like as operations managers, when stuff comes in, I have to decide where, how do we go about utilizing that thing, and then how do we get it from it having come in to going into the shop. And so things that will go into that. Do you want me to walk in?
Hi.
You want
Sorry,
me to walk through the whole process of how I sort of make the decisions for that to sort of move into the shop?
Yes, please. That would be great.
Yeah, okay. And I know we already discussed some questions before, because I would like to appreciate you to share with all of my team members. And
Okay.
yeah, thank you. And the second question is, for each of these key processes, who is responsible for managing or overseeing them? Are they any written the guidelines, or are they managed informally?
Yeah. All right. So, yeah, really, I mean, for me, we really have kind of two key processes, and we have a manager for each of those. So the first, it used to be a lot more complicated than what it is now. We used to make it so that people could sort of come in and we had like a little op shop and a whole bunch of stuff. But then COVID came and it basically shut everything down, and we moved everything into the shop. We have just one shop area now. It never used to be like that, but basically ever since COVID, it's stayed that way. And so we just have the shop, which is where we service people. Uh, like, what would be the word for it? Like through free things and donations for items. And then we have basically the back of house. We do have reception, which we use for memberships and some ministry type things. And then we have another sort of a bit of other, we do run like a ministry type thing on a ministry meal, as for like, what's that? Ministry meal on like Fridays. But that's sort of like a little bit of a side note to the key processes. So realistically, the main process for like one of the main ones, which is the customer service in the shop, and then that's managed by she wouldn't say that she is, but she is the shop manager. And then so she has staff underneath her, or volunteers, you guys would refer to them as. And there's a number of tasks, obviously servicing the people, but then putting the stuff out into the shop, pricing the items that are in the shop. She also determines the giveaway. Generally speaking, probably about 70% determines the giveaway, and then also scans the people that go through the shop. So they scans the membership and goes about allocating the freebies and basically the entire, other than like outside donations, like donations that come in not through the shop, which were like usually through companies or through people who have just donated to us for the sake of donating. All other funding for the entire organization is from the shop itself, basically. Pretty much 90%, I would say, of our cash flow is from what comes in through the shop. The rest of that, so the other main process for me really is basically stock flow, which is flow of the stock from when it comes in to how we get it into the shop so it can be sold. And really what that revolves around is, the first question is labor. Do we have enough labor to to process it, and then how much of it do we have. So as an example, like this morning we got in a pallet of salmon, and we don't have a place to store it. We don't have so we've already got a whole bunch of salmon as well. So basically, so like if you go through the decision-making process, basically, instead of bringing it inside because I don't have labour, then we'll put it outside in the truck, and we'll deal with that another day. And then what the aim is that we've lowered the price in the shop so that the salmon that we already have sells faster, so that then we can hopefully make space for the salmon that we've just got. But there's a whole like as an example, sometimes we'll get let's just say we get a pallet of potatoes. Now we have in the shop we have like basically a 2 kilo free giveaway, but then after 2 kilos you have to pay. So the reality is that if we get that pallet of potatoes and then we can move all of those potatoes inside and then put them into the shop, it ensures that more people have access to the potatoes, but it also means that then there's a chance that we can actually earn money on those potatoes from people. Cheerio, thank you. Yeah, that's okay. It is what it is. And then we have a chance of actually getting some kind of income from those potatoes from people, say, maybe getting 3 kilos instead of 2. But the reality is that most of the time we don't have enough labor. And so if I have enough labor, we bring it inside and we put it in our fruit and veg area. If we don't have enough labor, then generally speaking, especially with potatoes, we'll just put it out into our fresco. And basically people can just take that for free, however much that they want. The reason we put it into al fresco is because the black crates, which they come in, we have to return. And so we can't put them out, say, on the fence line or something, because a lot of people have a bad habit of taking the crates and they're not allowed to. We have to return them. So we put them into al fresco so that people in the shop can still watch it and manage it. And so, yeah, basically when the stuff comes in, it has 3 different areas that it can go into. Either it goes into ambient, which is basically non-cold storage. It's basically anything that is just like ambient temperature, like your regular temperature. Doesn't matter. And then you've got the stuff that needs to be cold / refrigerated, and then fruit and veg. So fruit and veg will go to a sorting area. And what else is there? And then the ambient stuff, if it's full pallets, it goes to our shed. If it's if it's broken and needs to be repackaged, it goes into a repackaging area. But otherwise, it will go straight into the storeroom to be priced to go into the shop. And then depending on labour, will depend on then how we go about processing it. So as an example, if we get in, let's say, 20 kilo bags of almonds, most people aren't going to pay money to us for, actually, let's go flour, because flour, we've had that before. So sometimes we'll get like an entire pallet of 20 kilo bags of flour. All right. So if I've got enough labor, we'll get those. We can sell flour at $1 a kilo. So we could potentially take that flour down, repackage it, and then put it into the shop at 1 kilo lots for $1. But generally speaking, we don't have enough flour. And people won't pay money for a 20 kilo bag of flour because they're not going to use a 20 kilo bag of flour before it's sort of once you open it, it's going to start going off. So generally speaking, because we don't have enough labor to even move it, we'll just put it out in al fresco and people will just take it for free. Sometimes we have tried contacting some bakeries and stuff like that, and we have had some bakeries which use large amounts of flour that will take some and pay for it. But generally speaking, that's what it comes back to: labour. How much of it do we have? And then the other question, which is that what is the when does it expire? How long do we have to process this item? Can we store it? Or does it need to, or how fast does it need to move? And that will then determine how much the price that we put on it, how we go about processing it, and then, you know, whether it maybe goes out as a giveaway. So specifically, we don't store things that are cold, things like milk, things like yogurt, things like anything that's generally cold, things like juice. We have we have about 10 freezers, which we can freeze stuff, but we have one fridge. And so the reason for that is normally the things which are cold have the shortest expiry date, and so they need to move the fastest anyway. And they're also and then that also then prioritizes those for us to as a giveaway. So we'll usually use cold things as a giveaway so that they can then move faster.
Yes, I see. Thank you. Your information is really helpful.
Got it. Thank you. Hi, Daniel. My name's Sarah. I'm just going to ask you a few more questions. Now, you did mention about two of your main processes, which is basically the stock flow, and then the other was just the way the customer service is done. I was just wanting to know, like, do you have a structured approach of handling these processes, such as, like, do you plan, document, monitor, or like, do you improve these processes over time? Or like, do you have a structured approach to these processes?
So it's, I mean, it depends what you mean by structured. Do you mean, do we have something that's written down which is solid and non-fluid and is fixed, that, you know, doesn't change, like in a document form? Or do you mean, do we have specific rules that we follow under a certain set of circumstances?
I would say the first option. So do you have it written down somewhere, like these are the steps that you'll follow for each process? And then, like, do you plan, document either way?
That we do. I have been, that we really do. Saying the us and men. So basically, because we're a faith-based organization, we have no idea what's going to come and just rock up. Like, I don't know in the morning, unless I've had a phone call the day before, I don't know what I'm going to end up having to deal with the next day. So really, we have like a very loose framework in that there's I gave you, there's some rules which we basically follow, but they're very fluid. It's a very fluid process in that those rules can just be changed, because I don't even know whether all of my volunteers are going to show up. And so, you know, if I don't have enough workers, then the way that we process that thing is going to change. If I all of a sudden have an additional 5 workers, then we're going to do something different to what we would have done otherwise. And so I have been meaning at making writing out specific procedures that we follow and what those look like. But the reality is that pretty much 98% of what we do and the way that we do it is in my head and in the head of the founder, and that's pretty much it. Like, without without the two of us, the organization pretty much doesn't function. You can't just go to some notes that were written somewhere,
Right.
except for maybe the answers that I've given Lynn. So yeah, so realistically, yeah, I mean, in terms of planning, it's more along the lines of we have sort of rules which we follow. Like if we get this thing in, this is the sort of the way that we go about handling that. If we have enough labor, slash if we don't have enough labor, this is the way that we handle it. And then that's the sort of the case with multiple different items. So like as an example, the other day, yesterday we got in a pallet of drinks, which is basically gooey drinks. You've got, you think about soda, like Coke and Sprite and stuff. When the can busts, it's sugar and liquid, and so that oozes out and then it dries out. And because it's inside plastic, so the way they package it is they package it in cardboard inside plastic, and so what happens is that the sugar comes out and the liquid soaks into the cardboard, and that then becomes like a feeding ground for bugs and microbes. And what happens is that the plastic holds it together and makes a nice humid, warm environment for bugs to grow, and it's what the word I use for it is called manky. And basically, when we get that pallet in, we've now got a dedicated person who takes care of it. But basically, it moves now. So the process is it goes into the shed, and then as he has time, he goes and processes it. And the way that he processes it is he will open them up. He then has a tub, like a garbage bin type size, like a 20-litre, I think, or might be actually 50-litre garbage bin, and then he fills that with water. He then puts the cans into the water, which one washes them, but also if they float, it means that then they've got air in them and they're no good. They've already, so it helps him to sort through them. And then the ones that sink, he then puts them out, and he usually will I think he puts them into the sun for a little bit just to see whether they then explode, because sometimes the aluminium is so thin that even though after he's freed them, because we don't know what's happened to the pallet before it's got to us. We don't know what's happened to the cans. We don't know why they're on the pallet. We don't have any of that information. And then so he basically, for some reason, these cans have split, whether they've been dropped or whether they've been heat treated or something beforehand. So yeah, so he'll put them out and let them sit, usually I think for a day or so. And what happens is usually about 10% of those still die. They'll still explode, still start leaking more goo before then separating them and then moving them inside into the drinks area before they get packaged for sale.
Got it.
So there's a process that exists, but that entire process isn't written down.
Right. And it depends, it varies from different pallets of goods.
Yeah. So as an example, if he just suddenly leaves one day, I have nobody to do that. He is the only he invented that process.
Got it.
Like he created it. Now I'm aware of the process, but I would then have to train another person. I'd have to, it's not like we just advertise positions. Like we just rely on God to provide the person. And so he may not just provide a person for another 6 months. And so we just have to find another way of dealing with it until then.
Got it. Yeah, that's a very interesting way of dealing as well. I was just my second question was something that I think you've already answered quite a few times. It's just about how you basically sort and allocate the donated goods, but I feel like you've already pretty much covered that topic a few times.
So,
I was just
I'll add something that I haven't said, which is basically the way that we go about sorting it, is that it comes back to prayer and what I guess you would call creative solutions, ways of dealing with those items that other people have either not thought of or never thought of before. So as an example, one of the primary things that we sell in the shop is expired meat. Now, and so, but you can't actually sell expired meat. And so the way that the founder came up with this was basically if in your house, you're fine if you get like say sausages, right? And you chuck them in the freezer and they're in date when you put them in the freezer, but then 3 months later when you come to your sausages and you get them out of the freezer, you then defrost them and cook them. That's fine, right? But the reality is that once it's in the freezer, and it's past the expiry date, if you are a shop, you can't legally sell that. So what we do is we have a freezer bag, and then the customer buys the bag, and they just so happens that it comes with a whole bunch of freezer stuff inside it. And so they can buy the bags without the stuff if they really want to. Apparently, we have sold an empty bag for $10 back when they were only $10. But the reason, what that means is that then they get a whole bunch of frozen goods, which are still fine for human consumption. But they're actually paying for the bag and not the stuff that's inside it. Does that make sense? So then they get a benefit, and then we don't break any laws. And so that's what it really comes back to, creative solutions that other people haven't thought of that enable this place to basically function. And that comes through prayer. And pretty much that's the way that we deal with everything that comes in, and the difficulties that we have, say with human beings and the way that we treat things, even like controls that we put in place to assist people with their issues. It all comes back to prayer and how can we go about making it so that there's controls in place so that we don't see those things that are necessarily undesirable. So as an example of that is we have had certain circumstances where, like if Friday afternoons is a good example of this. And so if you want to see people at their worst, you come Friday afternoon and then we'll take away some of the controls that we have. And we'll put out a bunch of, we'll just put out a pallet of fruit and veg, like unsorted and stuff. And what you'll end up having is basically people fighting with each other, jumping on top of the pallet, and turning into animals, basically. And so we put controls in, and through prayer, basically where we limit it to, we make one layer of a pallet, so then it spreads it out so that people can't jump on top of each other. And then we'll also limit it to 2 pallets at a time in the area. And then sometimes we just won't even put the stuff out, just because the way that they're behaving is unacceptable.
Got it. That can be quite difficult to handle, right? That answers pretty much it. I just have one more question. You did mention that customer service on the shop floor is a big part of is one of the main processes as well. Can you just can you like elaborate it just a little bit so I have an understanding of like how you provide this service on the shop floor?
Yeah, okay.
Or why it's a major process.
So, well, basically, all of like I said, like 90% of what the foundation's funding runs off comes through the shop, like effectively, and so that's why it's a major process. And then we have sort of 3 areas. Well, there's 4 areas to the shop, or maybe 5. So you've got there's like the items which you can sort of purchase, which is 3 sections. So there's a 50 cents area, there's like a $1.50 area, and then there's sort of whatever we couldn't make $1.50 with like $2 or $2.50, sometimes $3 or more. And then there is the fruit and veg area, which is free for the first 2 kilos, and then any kilos after that is I think it's $2 a kilo, which can change. The people in the store can change that depending on if we just have too much fruit and veg and a few other things. Usually Fridays, they can change it, but it comes back to labor again. And so because of that, then we have a set of scales so that they can weigh the fruit and veg for the customers. And then when you come to the service area, or the what's the word? I don't know. I've forgotten the term for it. Basically the point of sale. That we have a daily giveaway, so we give away. It's usually we aim for about 3 items, unless they're like really good items, like milk or something. We usually, if we give away milk, sometimes we'll limit it to only 2. But yeah, we usually will have 3 items which we will give away, which goes with the membership, and so they get 2 kilos of fruit and veg for free, as well as 3 items for free. And then with that, the point of sale behind them is also a fridge, which has other items in there for donation, and then there's the freezer, which has the freezer bags in it. And then there's also another little part there where we put sandwiches, basically instant meals which are made in the kitchen, for them to sell. So it's a person whose responsibility in that is sort of like the checkout, that they have to weigh the fruit and veg that they have, ensure that it meets the kilo requirement for their membership, scan their membership if they have one. If they have a membership, then they get the 2 kilos for free. So then they have to price it. So then they allocate them the freebies. If they don't have a membership, they don't get those things, and they have to go under a different set of rules. They only get 1 kilo for free, and they have to pay after that. And then they also have to add up anything else that they've bought in the shop, and then process that through the till that we have. The till that we have does not add the items up for you. You have to do that in your head, and it also does not calculate the change. So you have to also calculate that in your head. And then, look, what I worked out the other day is basically for them to serve the number of people that we would possibly serve in a day, which is around about 200, they have 1 minute to do that per customer. Because we serve about those 200 people in 4 hours. So, you've got 240 minutes in 2 hours. And then outside of the shop, we have bread, which people take for free, and then whatever else, that's the alfresco area. So then whatever else we've put out there that they can take for free. So today we put out some cat food that they could take. But they also then technically kind of have to manage outside as well, because sometimes people can't control themselves, and also people make a mess.
Got it. Thank you. That gives me a lot of information. I'll just pass it on to the next person who has questions.
Sure.
Hello, Daniel. My name
Hey.
is Shivam.
Hey,
So, my first question is, how are the items selected for the sale in the shop, and who decides what gets restocked or used in the frozen bags?
All right, so basically so I didn't mention this before, but when so I'll allocate sort of a staff that's in charge of sort of the particular process. So specifically, like say with the frozen bags, there's allocated staff member for the freezers because they have to have training, obviously, because of that situation, like they've got to be able to determine whether something is able to be put in the freezer or not, or whether it needs to go to the animals. And part of the main question, whether they're in the fruit and veg area sorting or whether they're in the meat slash frozen area, the main question that they're asking themselves is, would I use this if, or would I purchase this myself? You know, would this be something that I would use if I had it? Obviously, you know, some people they don't. You know, like we had kidneys the other day, and you know, most people don't have kidneys. But like, if you were desperate and you didn't have any food, you would eat kidneys. And so that's like, you know, you just got to think a little bit. Sometimes you have to think a little bit outside the box. But so when they're coming to make the decision for does this stuff, is it to go into the shop or not? That's the main question that you're asking yourself. With the meat, it is a little bit more complicated. There's things that we go through, like from looking at expiry dates to looking at because we don't have any prior information on that thing, what's happened to it. We have none, right? So sometimes, you know, and so we have different rules. So you look at the expiry date, but that doesn't mean anything a lot of the time, because you know part of the reason we could have got it is because somebody took it out of the freezer and put it on the shelf in the shop. You know, we don't know that's what's happened, but that could be the reason, because the shop attendants come along and oh, that's supposed to be frozen. Oh, it's not frozen. Oh, well, we'll throw it out then. You know, so we've got to be able to determine those things. So if there's discoloration in the meat, then basically it's out. The only time that it would still be in, if we've got two different colors of meat, then that's out. Unless, of course, we have, say, 10 of them. If we have 10 of them, then and we have a feeling they might be okay, what we'll do is we'll take one and we'll cook it, and then we'll test it. And if that one is okay, like it smells, like when we open it, it smells okay. When we cook it, there's no off smell. And then we taste it and there's no off thing, like no off taste to it. Then that means the other 9 we can be pretty certain are okay, and we'll put them in. You follow? You follow? Yeah. So that's basically, it's like goes along. So there's off color. There's also smell. Smell usually, especially with chicken, it doesn't matter if the packaging is sealed or not. You'll be able to smell the chicken through the packaging. And same thing, like say like prawns and seafood. Same thing. Like if it's bad, you can smell it. And so if there's any sort of off odor, those will go. So it does take a little bit more training, but the reality is, like, if you yourself had smelly meat, you wouldn't be using it, right? And so that's really the main question is, would you use it? Would you put that in your freezer at home? Just give me a few seconds.
Once.
I am running low on battery power, so I think we might have to, if this cuts out, we might have to continue on my phone. So just keep that in mind. Other than that, basically the staff which is in charge or that's allocated to the thing is the person who decides. So as an example, when things come in, to a certain extent. So basically the first line is me. So when something comes when it's first delivered, I then allocate it to the area that it goes to. So if something looks like it needs to be repackaged, it'll go to the repackaging area. So that means a different person gets put in charge of that. If something looks like it needs like extra attention, say like with the drinks and the Menke palette of drinks, then that goes to a different, that goes specifically for the drinks person to deal with. If something needs like it's straightforward, it's run of the mill, then it'll go straight into say like the storeroom where it can go straight into the shop. If we don't have enough labor, then sometimes I'll bypass all of the all processes altogether and just put it straight out into alfresco or straight out in the yard for people to just take. If I've got enough labor, say like with the flour example, then it'll go down to the sorting area, and then those people will repackage it so that it can then be sold, repackaged into the shop. So it comes back to that same thing. Like, do I have enough labor? How much do I have? Can we process it? Can I store it? Like if I get an entire pallet of ice cream, can I, what do I need to do so that that can be stored, because it has to be frozen, right? And so if I don't have room in the freezer, I then need to make changes across the entire organization to make it so that there's space for it to fit. Otherwise, I'm going to have a melted mess on the floor. So what that would normally look like, it might mean that I lower prices of some of the things in the shop so that things move faster. It might mean that we have some items that are in the freezer which are not of a low value, say like cat food or dog food, that gets taken out and just put outside or something for people to take, and then the ice cream takes its place. It really depends on what we have, what how much space we have, and then like the labor that we have, and all of those types of things all come into play with each individual sort of decision. And then so going forward, so the shop people, the people who are in the shop underneath the shop manager are the ones, generally speaking, they have the ability to set the prices in the shop, in that they label the prices. To a certain extent, the shop manager oversees that, and there is some guiding rules, i.e. we sort of aim to be about half the price of the supermarket. But then the other thing, and I did say it in the message, one of the key things, it's not really, the price isn't so much about the quality of the item. It's not so much about how much we can make. It's that they're separate issues. What it's really about is we have this item and we want to make it available to the largest number of people possible. And so if you take something, say like fish, right? Let's say the salmon that we got in, right? And I just put that out there in alfresco for free. You're going to have people who are taking 20 boxes of it. All right, because there's no limit, there's no control, right? If I bring it in and I set a price of it in the shop at $1, you'll still have people who take 5 or 10 boxes of it because they're willing to pay $1 for 50 boxes because it's such a prized thing. So then we have to increase the price, don't we, to like say $3 or maybe $4 so that more people have access to it and greed doesn't come into play. And so the price is more about how do we make it so that more people have access to this item relative to what we have in stock. So if I have only, say, 10 boxes of fish, then I might put the price up higher because I don't have a lot. And so I want that to be able to be more accessible to more people. But if I've got 100 boxes of the fish, right, not only do I need it to move faster, but even if I lower the price, the same number of people are going to have access to it because I've got 100 boxes, right? And so the price is more relative to how fast that stock needs to move, its use by date, the my storage space per se, and the labor that I have, that it has to do with the actual item and its value in the real world.
Yep, thanks for that. So my next question, as you mentioned, there are a lot of processes in this business. Do you conduct any regular reviews or evaluations or check-ins to assess how your key processes are performed, or do you monitor them regularly?
So the way that takes place is through, look, if you've ever done any sort of management or any sort of supervising thing, you always have to check when you've asked somebody to do something, you've always got to check to see whether they did it. All right. So that's basically a daily type thing. Like, you ask somebody to go and do something, and have they done it? And then because the reality is that if they haven't done it, it still needs to be done. And then the secondary part of that is, like, let's say, despite all of your checking and all of the other checking that might go into place of, like, seeing whether something gets done or not. To a certain extent, like, say, like, I'm always training new people, but at a certain stage, you get to know whether that person's capable of doing the thing that you've asked them or not. So there is a certain point where you don't necessarily have to check. You know that if you've asked them, it'll be done. And so the way then, so like, let's say, somebody's experienced and then you're not necessarily checking up on them. The way that then comes through is through either colleagues going, hey, this wasn't done, like, basically verbal feedback. Or say you get complaints in the store, hey, look, this is manky. Like this, like, I bought drinks and one of them was empty. And so then, you go back to, like, the person who's doing the drinks and you go, hey, look, one of the customers had this, maybe we need to change the process. And same thing, like, say with like, we have people taking too much stuff. We had one guy who's like, people are just taking too much stuff. And so we put in like a turnstile so that it helps limit it. But the reality is that it's the same, like, you get better as you go along, and basically it's like a continuous improvement type thing as you sort of progress through. And then, like, we do have certain controls in place, and a lot of the time, or because we're a faith-based organization, we tend to deal with things a lot differently to other people. And sometimes, or people who don't have faith or they don't know God aren't able to deal with the situation through faith the way that we do, because we use faith and they don't have any. And so, as an example, we had a guy leave recently because he basically expected people to not take so much. And he expected them to not be so greedy. He expected them to not, and he'd end up in arguments with people and that sort of thing. And the reality is that, we seem to have this expectation of everybody that they should be like a saint. When the reality is that, one, they're not, two, you aren't, and three, Jesus would never have had to come if everybody was a saint. Like, it's an unrealistic expectation. How many people in the world do you know that are saints? So you can't expect it of everybody. You've got to expect some people that are going to have problems. And the real reason that we're here is to help those people, those very people. That's what we're here to do, to help those people. And so I was serving in the shop the other day, and they're like, this lady, she said to me, oh, this lady, actually, I think it was you, Lynn. She's like, that lady, she's taking lots of stuff. And I said, well, have you prayed for her? Pray for her. She needs prayer. That person needs a miracle, because the only way they're going to stop stealing is if they get a miracle. They actually realize that what they're doing is wrong. Because it doesn't matter if you punish them. You send them to jail, they're just going to become a 10 times better thief, because they're going to learn how all of the other thieves didn't get caught. They're not going to stop stealing. They're just going to get better at it. And they've got to have a revelation. Didn't really have a faith of his own, because we don't determine whether somebody can volunteer for us based on whether they're, like, because it's part of an outreach, like a ministry type thing. So they don't have to be Christian to volunteer. But unfortunately, that was kind of where that was a limitation. He wasn't able to overlook their evil, I guess, in his sight. He wasn't able to overcome that. It just became too much for him, and so he moved on. But for us as an organisation, and as people who like that's the way I see it. Is that the reality is that we're here to help those very people. That that's the reason they're in need, is because they have these kind of problems, and the reality is that the rest of society has rejected them for those reasons. So we've got to try to help them in some way. And look, at the very base level, it's from a provision of food one. But like I have, is one of the ones that we've had specific trouble with, who I'm reasonably sure is has I've had many reports of theft of, and what's the other word for it? Multiple people, I have been told, multiple feedback that I have received, that people have issues with this individual. I'm actively trying to look at, well, actually, I'm hoping to catch up with them tomorrow, sort of for lunch, and try to work with them and see if I can find out what's actually, what in their life is causing all this drama for them, and why, like, what can they do to change that? And rather than oh, we'll just ban you, and you can go and starve.
Yep, that was some lovely insights. Thank you. All right, so I'll pass on to the next person.
Hi, Daniel.
Hi.
I'm Zifan. I want to ask you the question about how do you gather feedback from volunteers, staff, or customer, or to improve your process, and how often do you change results from that input?
Yeah, so look, it's basically verbal. We don't have any other process like really in place, and that it's really ad hoc. It's like off the cuff, very organic. It's not like some kind of official kind of here's a complaints box, put it in here. We deal with it as it comes, as it happens, and we sort of have meetings in relation to what's happened based on that. Kind of like like your garden. All of a sudden it's growing a weed, and so you pull it out. Or you notice it's growing a weed, and so then you pull it out. You deal with it at the time when it happens. Or sometimes you get so busy, then you deal with it the next moment that you have time, and then what you when you say how often, or you could say almost always we do change things. The problem is, like I said before, a lot of our policies are extremely fluid, and so you don't like the people, or maybe the volunteers. They might not necessarily notice a change to what's to the way that we handle something, purely because there's not really anything written down. But when, like, we say, me and the founder, we have a meeting and we'll make a decision. Oh, well, this is the way that we're going to deal with this going forward. As an example of this, this week we had an instance where we've got 3 trucks now, which we've never had before, and some stock came in late on the Monday, and I wasn't here. I wasn't present, so I didn't know about it. But the founder was here, and he put that stock into the truck, like to refrigerate overnight. And his plan was that to be the giveaway for the next day, but he didn't communicate it to anybody. And so I've come in the morning and spoken to the shop staff, and then we've had a look at basically everything else, not realizing that it was even there. And then we've gone and set up a what the daily giveaway is going to be, only for him to come in like half an hour after we've already started giving stuff away, and go, hey, what about the stuff that's in the truck that that we're like, is everybody having kidneys? And I'm like, what kidneys? So we sat down and we had a chat, and we said, look, I said to him, look, what we really need to do, like if we have a something come in the day before, or we have an idea of using something as a giveaway for the next day, then a note needs to be left for the shop staff, so that's what it is, right? Because what happened was, the truck, normally what would happen when we had two trucks is that the trucks would be unloaded in the morning because they had to be used on the road. But because we've got three trucks, they didn't need the third truck, so it didn't get unloaded. So nobody knew about it. And then, and so it was just like, it came as it was a, well, it was kind of like a weed growing gun. It just happened as a result of us then now having three trucks. So now all of a sudden we've got a new problem which we've got to deal with, and then we changed the way that we process it. Was that written down? No, that's just in my head and his head. And the reality is that I actually still haven't yet communicated that to the shop manager that that's what we would do. However, it is what I have spoken to her previously about her doing that for the days that she's not in, but I haven't actually said that that's what me and Bruce have decided, because it is so fluid. I've had times where I've gone and told somebody something only to find out that the founder has created his own separate process, which is different to the advice that I've given that person. And then it's created an issue. And so what he has done is created another separate process altogether, which is a mix of the two to cover both bases. And sometimes it does get a little bit messy. And I would love to have things written down a little bit more. But the reality is that when you do that, it also creates additional work. And so, one, I've got to have the time to do it. And then two, do I want to continue having to have that additional workload to do, per se? I mean, it would be great for especially training of, things that don't change so much, aren't so fluid, to have things written down. However, that's not how I'm definitely, I've got it on my board as something that I'm aiming for. But again, if I did write them down, they have to be written down in a way which is fluid, like more like a flowchart style. Like, if this happens, then do this. If this happens, then do that. If this happens, then do this. And then, they may end up being quite complex flowcharts. What was the second half of that question? Oh, yeah, how often do we change it? So the reality is that we do change them quite a lot. But see, the reality is that change that we just say, like as an example for this week that we implemented, nobody else really knows about that change. And sometimes we have a plan to make the change, but we've still got to put things in place to change it. So we can still get feedback, which is, say, negative in the lieu of that change not having taken place, because things don't happen instantaneously. I would say, basically, like, probably 95% of all the feedback that we do get, we do make changes to. They're just not always seen. That makes sense.
Thank you. I also want to ask, how is the revenue generated from sales used? Is it just like support, phase work, cooperation, or community initiatives, or specific internal process?
Yeah. So basically, I don't know. Well, I don't know to what extent you're aware of living by faith, but realistically, once you start living by faith, which is the reason that it's called Faith Works, is that God supplies what you need as you need it. And so, it's also part of the criteria of being a not-for-profit. But the reality is that if we are going to need to pay a $3,000 to $5,000 electricity bill, then God will provide the money for that $3,000 to $5,000 electricity bill to be paid. And that's just sort of how it is. As an example, to that, let's say probably it'll be about 6 months ago now. We had a bit of a surplus of money, and then what ended up happening the next month is we got a new contract with like a large contract where we had to purchase a truck. That truck ended up costing us $14,000. And then we also had to do maintenance on that truck and maintain it. And then we also ended up having a freezer die. And so that surplus for that month ended up, it was like a deficit for the next month. And that's basically the way that it goes. Like that's, if we say have a lot of money sort of one month, it's because God knows that the next month is going to be something that we need to use that for. We do the real aim that we do have is for us to be a blessing to people and their lives. So that includes like our volunteers. We do try to prioritize the people who help us by helping them with things that they have as needs in their lives. But even like as an example that I gave, there are some times when we just don't have free like stuff to give away, which we may have received free. And so we will use our money to buy stuff to then give it away for free, because we want to be a blessing to people, because we're not here for money. We're not here to make money. We're here to bless people.
Thank you. Thank you for your explanation. Maybe I will go on to another member.
Hello. Thank you for your time, Daniel. And I
No
just
problem.
had a question about have you ever faced a situation where it was difficult to decide what's right, like in handling expired goods, donation shortages, or customer complaints? And how was it resolved? So was that just a situation that you faced that?
So you look, basically, we deal with like those things that you deem as being difficult. They're things that we deal with every day. Like, you know, the expired, you know, what I'd say, because we take stuff that other people won't take. Like as an example, like, so I used to work in a milk factory. They have a thing called low code. What low code means is if milk has an expiry date, which is in 10 days' time, the factory is not allowed to send that out on a truck to a distribution center, say like Coles or Woolworths. So in other words, if it's still got 10 days till it expires, they have to throw it in the bin, because it takes time for that item to be processed. So it has to first be shipped to the warehouse, say the Coles DC or the Woolworths DC. Then it has to sit there and wait to be picked by the picking staff. Then from there it has to then be loaded onto another truck and then be shipped to the store, where it then has to be put out onto the shelf and sit on the shelf to be purchased by a customer. That entire process, by the time it gets to the store, if it's 10 days, it could have 1 or 2 days left on it when it gets there onto the shelf for the customer to actually purchase it. The shop is then going to have to discount it so that then it can actually sell it. Right? So they're just not allowed to send it out altogether, and then it will be thrown in the bin. So they're not. For us, we will take milk that has a day, right? Because we can get rid of a pallet of milk in a day. We could get rid of probably 3 pallets of milk in a day, in all reality. And so we deal basically pretty much my entire day is full of those types of decisions that you're talking about. And the real reality of that is that the way those decisions are made is through prayer. It's through God giving wisdom for how to deal with that situation as it comes about at that time. So as an example, I had a guy the other day, let's say talk about a customer complaint, right? And this lady in the shop had basically abused him. And he was mad. He was ropeable. He was like, you need to do something about this person's behavior. They can't treat me like this. Blah 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 blah. He was angry. He was very angry, right? And I said to him, I said, "That's your job." Oh, he was not happy. So this comes to godly wisdom, and I said, "You have to be able to deal with human beings in the world and the way that they treat you. If I step in, look, I can step in, I can change the way this person treats you, but the reality is it actually undermines you. It diminishes you because say you leave this place and somebody else treats you, does somebody treat you the same, right? What are you going to go and have to ask that organization to punish them, right? You've got to set your own boundaries and your own controls, and you have to be able to deal with this situation, circumstance. It turned out that he was a Christian, and I said to him, I said, have you prayed for them? Have you been merciful to them? Because Jesus says, "Blessed are the merciful, because they shall receive mercy." Right? And he was not happy. Right? He was so not happy with what I said to him because basically I told him off for being mad. Right? Because he didn't have a right. He didn't have a right to be mad, especially at me, and to expect me to control another person's behavior based on his offense. He came to me later on, he said, "Can you explain to me what it is that you said to me?" Because he was not happy. Actually, what happened was he came in, I said, "Look, you need to deal with it." So then he said, "All right, I'm going to go and teach him a lesson." So he went into the shop to basically, I don't know what his plan was. His phrasing was teach them a lesson. So I took a video in there. I started video recording him because I'm like, what, is he going to go and assault this lady? And anyway, then he gets mad at me again for video recording it. Whole thing fell apart. He came to me again later on, and I said to him, "Look, man, who do you think needs help? Who does God say you are? God says that you're blessed. He says that you have access to the riches of heaven. He says that you are, like, your future, your eternity is secure. Like, who does God say you are? You're his child, you're loved, you're cared for. Okay, so what does what this other person has said have anything to do with that? And then who do you think needs help? Do you need help, or do you think the other person needs help? They're the one that needs help. They're the person who needs a miracle. They need it, right? Not you. So who do you think needs prayer? That person. Have you prayed for them? Right? Completely changed. He stopped being mad at me. He had respect for me. He said, "You're right." And I've never really thought about it this way before. And thank you for teaching me about Jesus and who he is. And so what it really comes back to, though, is that if I have no relationship with God, I can't help that person. And because I don't have those answers, and I don't have that wisdom, and I don't have the ability to speak into his life like I did. And that's really the whole reason that we exist, is that if we didn't have access to God's wisdom, then we wouldn't have the freezer bags. We wouldn't have a person downstairs who can, make turn food that comes in into meals that people could then, take home for $2. If it wasn't for the relationship that we had, we wouldn't have we wouldn't receive the things that we receive, which some people would just throw in the bin, right? But we have faith that God would give us an ability to find a way to use it so that then it can be usable for people, right? It's only because we have the faith that we do that we even exist. And that again comes back to the whole term of the faith works. Why it's called faith works is because, without that, I mean, our founder, I heard him once say, when he first came to rent the building, so we don't get this building for free. We rent it from the United Church, we pay $3,500 a month for this building. He said when he first came here, he didn't know where he was going to get the money from.
Yeah.
But he knew that God would back him up. God would provide for him. He didn't know how, but he knew God would because he had faith, right? And so he signed the contract to do it, and then ever since then he's had enough money to be able to pay it. And because but when he signed it, he didn't have that. He just had the faith to have it. And realistically, the short answer to your question is answers to prayer.
Okay. Yeah,
Thank
great.
you. Yeah. Thank you very much for the answer. I'll pass it over to Lee now.
Yeah. Thank you so much for your time and your available insights. This will be very helpful for us, our report on business process modeling practices.
Well, I hope so. I don't know if the people who you're doing it for will accept Jesus as an answer, but that's the reality.
Yeah, you give me a lot of information. Thank you.